What I heard true, was did the state not let the refs switch for that kind of stuff again? Is there truth to that? I don't know. Well, 3 of the refs reffing that game, and I thought they did a good job. But it was like you were reffing your own kid type of job. Like Doug Weber, whose son graduated from Kansas, Scott Stern and Kirk Kerner, who both Freeman. That was kind of crazy.
By Nathan.
Nathan's on that crew.
He said, I'm too close to the situation, so then they found different. So they must have done a little.
That's like, how you doing?
Somebody told me that it said that they tried to even switch on doing that game to stay warm up.
Okay, you guys are all set.
Fair job.
They did, right. And I think it was fair, but it was a little bit harder on, you know, how you coach your own kid, coach kids, and your kids want them, and you coach him a little bit harder than, grade him a little harder than everybody. Just kinda, right? That's news, that's.
My son would never tell you that. Neither one. And whatever Preston says is a lie.
Yeah.
That's at least 5 insurance.
Yeah.
By yourself.
I had all my, had all the stuff to hang in, like that. Then, on the way home, my professor called me, asked me when I'm going out. So, I was like, you see this thing on Kyle?
Yeah.
How far is mine?
Here?
No, from,
Yeah, that's an option, but I told Deb, I said, the odds of me ever remembering his family, so it's just a waste of whatever.
I didn't see him.
Whatever, it cost $10, it was a waste of $10.
I'm gonna leave Friday night, I'm gonna go out there for the next week, in Hunter. And he said he was out, coming,
Can't have this
I'm
thing.
usually out there. You can't, I just, you can't out with me for 2 days.
That led to
So,
trouble.
You'd be near mine.
And then I had a landlord I talked to today, he told me that if I still went in there, he said I should call him. He said he'd bring me up at least to the fence.
Not that I
He said that would be
I-
a lot. So, that was a good thing.
Cause some issues with that.
He told me this day, or this afternoon, he said, I need something to come in.
My buddies, they don't even better, they just quarter and everything was out there.
I will tell you that.
Got us quarter, got us quarter, and then
Went to the state
they got
fair.
10 points to the top. Yeah, I had that all figured
I know how
out.
they got there, I know how they got back.
I had lots of territory.
Yeah, I still owe my dad for that.
Gate beds and everything else.
All right, it's 7. Debbie, you want to take a roll call?
Slade,
Present.
Cody,
Yep.
Cory,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Kyle.
Yes.
Thank you. All right. Okay, are there any additions to the agenda?
The only one I had on there was what I emailed you guys earlier today. That came from came from Associated School Boards, and COSA is the school attorneys group in the state, which we can talk a little bit more about later, but it's based on some of the changes that came out from the Department of Health end of last week.
Okay. And then I see you don't have anything for executive session. I got a couple emails today that I think I would like to make you aware of.
Okay.
And,
Is that,
and to the rest of the board. It's a personnel thing, so,
okay.
so if we can just go in and, sure. They didn't want their names shared, so I figured I would do it that way if that's okay.
And last time we had kind of finished up by saying, let's push the voucher thing off till next meeting, so I think we probably need to add that on there.
Uh, Is Tom coming tonight at some point?
He said he won't be able to be here till about 7:45, so we'll just carry on. with
We'll
what
have,
we do.
okay.
He has to make a presentation in Parkland tonight.
All right. Any other motion, or, agenda additions? Then I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Motion by Corey,
Second.
second by Slade. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, same sign. Motion carries. You got any conflict of interest disclosures?
I do not.
Public input looks none? Okay, we need a motion to approve the following. Minutes of the regular scheduled board of school board meeting of August 10th, 2020. Minutes of the special school board meeting of August 10th, 2020. Minutes of the special school board meeting August 19th, 2020. Minutes of the special school board August 27th, 2020. Minutes of the Corn Belt Cooperative Board of Directors meeting on August 11th, 2020. Financial reports, claims for September, contract amendments for certified and classified staff, the contract of Heidi Shaw, paraprofessional for the 2021 school year, and a contract of Austin under long-term substitute for the 2021 school year.
So moved.
Motion by Slade.
Second.
Second by Corey. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Mr. Ball.
Elementary COVID action plan has been going pretty well. I'm amazed how the kids have adapted to all the changes, and they've really done a pretty good job with it, and it's really run pretty smooth. Take my glasses off so they don't bother me. Our first flyer Fridays on this Friday, September 18th. I believe we're going to run it just like we did last year. Elementary teachers are completing the following local assessments. We were able to get our star reading and math done, but when we do our DIBELS, reading and math, and I spelled out what actually DIBELS is, that's another local assessment. We normally bring a substitute in so the teachers can pull the kids individually, and I'm struggling obviously to get substitutes in. So we got a couple grades done, and normally we're done by now, but it's probably gonna take a lot longer. And we do that 3 times a year. On the back page, I've got the elementary enrollment from last year to this year. We picked up a couple more kindergartners last week. It still brings the total elementary down by 2 from last year at this time, and thank goodness for Cheddar County that keeps having babies out there. They're up 5, so we're a plus 4. That's a breakdown of the enrollments from last year to this year. We had our Title I nights, that's a requirement with the Title I program out at Wolf Creek and Cheddar County on September 1st. There's quite a few issues out at Cheddar County. Probably too long a list of issues to go into, but they've just been really difficult to work with. Cheddar County has been.
Adults or kids?
Adults. So Freeman, we're gonna wait till second semester to have, see if we can have our Title I night here in town. We are scheduling data retreats for the 2 colony schools. That's a requirement that we did in school improvement. It's something that we've continued to do, hopefully keep them schools out of school improvement. And then we signed up for the school store program. That's something that's about the only fundraiser we do at elementary. I just don't believe in sending elementary kids out door to door to do fundraising when the high school about beats everyone to death with it anyway. So this is the school store that basically it's online shopping and we get stuff back, so. That's all I have.
Questions? Thanks, Shane. Will?
We touched on Flyer Friday, same thing on Friday, the first one. Don't anticipate a lot of kids being on the list, just because we've been at school that long. We had homecoming week last week, and just kind of envisioned maybe the next couple after this, maybe kids kind of start needing a little extra help. But for now, And the list is about half done, and there's about 20 kids on it so far. So I mean, that's pretty good.
What is normal? Just out of
Last year we had
curiosity.
about 50, and then if you get your homework made up by Friday, you don't have to come. That list usually got down to about 20. And right now it's at about 20, so I'm sure it'll go down to about 10 or 15. And I still have some more kids to put on the list yet, but I'm thinking it'll be around that 10 or 15 kids the first time, which is a little less than normal.
The rookie number's massive, you need to bump that up.
I know, get everyone back on Friday to send them all in.
Yep.
Homecoming week, we survived. I thought it was a good week. Kind of last minute, wasn't necessarily planning the best, but we had some games on Thursday. It's kind of a fun day, and it ended up being really well. Even skipped out on fun. Wanted to be sick, but we survived. We went outside, had some games on the kickball field, had some, I don't know, across the line game. I have no idea what it was, but everyone else knew what it was. It looked like chaos to me, but apparently it was a good PE game. I have no idea. And then we finished with some volleyball. So overall, it was a good week. And the last thing, our PBIS, we have a meeting, that's that positive behavior system we did for the junior high. I haven't seen a lot of teachers using much of that to start with, but we were also a little unsure of how it was gonna work this year. Just, we were giving reward tickets and we had the store. We have our first actual meeting with our lady that comes and talks to us on Friday, so hopefully get some more guidance on how that's gonna look to get that going full force again, so I thought it was good for the junior high kids. That's all I have for today.
Anybody have questions? Thanks, Will. Are they, do we need to let them? Okay, thank you.
I actually don't have a whole lot. Most of what I've had, I've been sending you guys over the course of the month. Just kind of a couple of reminders here, I guess, on my end. Spoke with Marion. Kind of have a tentative scheduled date for our first sports co-op consolidation meetings, September 30th at 5, and they want to do it here because the two board members they're bringing would like to have a tour of the building before they come over. And then we're entering the third week of, we're participating in that state sentinel testing program where basically they want to come in and it's similar to what they do like nursing homes and hospitals where they want asymptomatic people that don't have any symptoms, they test them, and then we should get the results in a day, just to give you an idea of, where we're at. And so far, the first 2 weeks we did it, tests came back negative, so that's a good thing, and the hospital's helping us out a lot with all that stuff. And as far as the hospital goes, we still do a daily call with them every day at 9:30 a.m. They usually have, I'd say anywhere from 4 to 8 people in their hospital team that are in on the call, and then it's usually myself, Shane, Will, and Mr. Faulkner that are in on our end. So those have been good, they've been helpful. Freeman Academy's in on that call, and they're gonna add Menlo and Marion to that call so we can kind of get an idea of what's going on, the surrounding areas with some of that stuff. Still do call with the Department of Ed every Thursday at 1. That's just kind of more updates on their end, superintendent call. And then the Department of Health still sponsors informational calls Tuesdays and Thursdays of each week at 4 o'clock. So we kind of stay up to date on what the newest stuff coming down from all those different places. So that is what I have for right now.
One question. The first email you sent out about the critical infrastructure thing.
Yep.
Are we talking about that later?
Yep.
Okay, then I was gonna ask questions, but never mind. All right, any questions for Kevin? Thank you, Mr. Cruz. All right, we need a motion to, I suppose we better go over the budget first. Do you have anything you need to know?
Yep, there's not too much in changes since the preliminary budget. I made it so that you have last year's budget and the proposed budget, and then last year's total in the middle. I think it's not thinking of anything.
And as far, like number 2 on the agenda is to approve the tax levy requests. That's just kind of a formality because they basically just tell us what those are gonna be. We don't have any say in whether the state actually sets those. So,
maybe I can do this here, I don't know if it quite fits, but, so I've gotten asked by a couple people, and maybe you guys have to, President, I think it was the president did something, or USDA did some sort of school lunch thing for their continuing the lunch program thing. Is that, have you heard anything about that? Do you know what I'm talking about there? They were gonna do free meals until December, but
It's basically for schools that qualify on, I don't know how to say that, we are not a school that has the percentage of free and reduced that qualifies for that. You have to have a certain percentage of that.
okay, that's all, it's based off of free and,
Yeah,
okay, then I can tell people that.
yeah, there's like an open and a closed feeding system, and since we don't meet the requirements, the percentage requirements of free and reduced, then we don't get it.
Okay. Anybody else, anybody have any questions about the budget?
And the food service one is we're just, this is our first year, we're gonna see what happens. We're trying to keep costs down as much as we can, and we'll see what happens.
Great.
We've been having a lot of seconds, I can tell you that.
That's a good thing, right?
Yes.
Because the lunches are good.
Yes.
And then
Yep.
maybe
They're
makes money.
better than they were before, right?
Well, I mean, she has to follow the same guidelines that she did before, but, she knows what she's doing.
Good.
Those ladies do a good job.
Yeah, they do.
I think, I don't want to speak for them, but I think they appreciate the fact that they're, now technically working for us as opposed to what they were doing before, so. I think that's been helpful.
All right. Well, if no other questions, then do we have a motion to approve a resolution for the 2021 budget?
So moved.
Motion by Corey, second by Mark. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Okay, and then so this tax levy thing, that was.
They're listed on the resolution, so I mean, it's kind of like they go in here.
Okay, so then we need a motion to approve the tax levy request for 2021.
So moved.
Motion by Cody,
Second.
second by Corey. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. We need a motion to approve Schoen Fish and Company Incorporated to conduct the 2020 audit.
So moved.
Motion by Mark,
Second.
second by Slade. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
I got some signatures I'll have to get from you, Kyle.
Okay. Then we want to, motion, we want to move the board meeting from Monday, October 12th at 7 to Wednesday, October 14th at 7.
Only reason for that, we don't have school that Monday.
Okay. Does that work for everybody?
Yeah. So.
Sure. We need a motion to.
So moved. Second.
Motion by Cody, second by Mark. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed, same sign. Motion carries. All right, now the ASB, SD / COSA, is this, this is for the close contract.
So, you had asked about the critical infrastructure workers, and I put that after this because I guess if we want to do that, it's gonna kind of depend on which direction you want to go with this stuff. So, as I kind of explained in an email that I sent to you guys late last week, during the call with the Department of Ed last Thursday, which is usually headed by various people from the Department of Education, but usually the Secretary of Education is there. We went through a number of items, and I'm not exactly sure where it came from, but he made it a point to tell everybody that a lot of the information that we had been getting from the Department of Health was directive in nature, and we kind of built our plan around that with the idea that when certain things came up, the Department of Health was going to essentially tell us, you know, Kevin, this is what you need to do in this situation, so on and so forth. Even had some letters shared with me from some people who were either in close contacts themselves and received notification from the Department of Health. And in those letters, it was very clear that it said, you know, you are required to quarantine for 14 days, so on and so forth. You know, I could go on and on. Well, anyway, during this meeting, the secretary basically told us, he goes, what you need to understand is all this stuff is now just becoming recommendations. So they're trying to make the point that all along they were recommendations, but needless to say, I think there was some confusion along the way. So anyway, basically what they're telling us is all the information that comes from the Department of Health now is recommended, but it's not actually required. So as a result of that, there were a lot of people that were kind of up in arms because it doesn't provide us as a school a whole lot of protection, and it doesn't provide us with a whole lot of assistance when we're trying to make some of these decisions that we know are not going to necessarily be viewed favorably by some people. So Associated School Boards and the school attorneys group basically released a bunch of guidance, which I attached to that email that I sent to you this afternoon. And in that, it basically just talks about, there's a specific law, 1328.7.3, that deals with reducing the risk and spread of infectious disease. Basically, it says the school board or the superintendent can basically determine who should or should not be excluded from school, so on and so forth. So, you know, we have in our plan that we were going to follow the recommendations of the Department of Health and the CDC as it relates to some of this stuff. But what Associated School Boards and COSA is saying is the board essentially needs to make a motion one way or the other, and I listed that on here as far as what they're saying. So you have two options. One would be to follow the Department of Health guidance and recommendations related to temporary exclusion from a school setting. COVID-19, exclude based on current CDC and South Dakota Department of Health guidance, which is what we've been operating under the assumption of, and that would also be the recommendation of, you know, our school attorney as well as the other superintendents in the area that I've talked to. Basically, the fear amongst them is a consistency issue. If we don't, you know, obviously there's a liability part that goes with it. If you don't take the recommendation of the medical experts, you know, you back yourself into a corner, so on and so forth. So there's that option, or the other option would be you can make a motion to do something different than the Department of Health guidance, but what you need to do is with a high level of specificity dictate what exactly those guidelines are going to be and have a reasoning as to why you're going to do that, as opposed to not following the recommendations of the Department of Health. So basically what I would say is the best course of action, and my recommendation would be follow what the Department of Health puts out as far as, and we're just specifically talking about quarantining people that come into close contact with COVID-19. So that's what my recommendation would be. That's what our attorney's recommendation would be. That would be similar to the statement that was released last Thursday afternoon that I emailed you from the school administrator group and the Associated School Boards, just saying we should follow those recommendations. However, as the Secretary of Education said last Thursday, you as a board reserve the right to do whatever you want to in that particular case. So.
Now, the SD Department of Health, do they basically get their marching orders from the CDC? Or do they ever in conflict as far as what they're recommending?
So what we've noticed from the Department of Health is, you know, a lot of it comes based on the recommendations of the CDC, but as a state, they've done some things a little bit differently than maybe what, you know, specifically what the CDC has said that they can do. So.
Is there any way we can separate that? I guess for me,
Just follow the Department of Health.
just follow the South Dakota Department of Health guidelines. I mean, CDC is looking at the whole country, and what's good for us isn't good for New York and
Right.
Miami. And I guess I'd be a lot more comfortable if we just took guidelines. from the South Dakota Department of Health, and maybe left the CDC out of the verbiage in that. I don't know how you guys feel about that, but for me, it's a lot more localized, and I could trust them for our specific instances a lot more.
I like that.
Yeah. What's the why are they backing off of making it, why are they?
That is a fantastic question. I can only assume what the reason is, and I think it's more political in nature than it is actually backed by science and, all that stuff. I think, because our governor has been basically, everybody come to South Dakota, we allow people to be free, so on and so forth, that kind of contradicts with what the Department of Health was telling us to do as far as, you're required to quarantine, so on and so forth there. But that's just speculation. I think overall, I really have no idea because nobody's really said one way or the other. Basically, all we know is that what we thought was directive in nature before is now being told, now we're being told that that's under recommendations, and that you as a local board ultimately have to decide how we want to handle that specific situation.
And this might be a dumb question, but I think if I had COVID-19, Mike Remington would not be allowed to come to school because that would be close contact, correct?
Correct. So it doesn't change at all. So like if I test positive, I am required to be out for the 10 days of isolation, so on and so forth. What this is specifically related to is if you are, according to what the Department of Health says, if, say, you test positive and I'm within 6 feet of you for 15 consecutive minutes or more, then I would have to self-quarantine because there's a high likelihood that I probably contracted the virus as well. So.
If we do go off script and come up with our own guidelines, it's gonna be really difficult from a liability standpoint to cover all our bases. So I guess I will be wary of doing that.
Well, yeah, because if you don't cover your bases, then you're not doing things on a consistent basis, then it goes back in the school board. And I don't know about you guys, but I really don't feel like getting sued anytime soon.
Do they take my dad?
No, they just take.
They just had to.
They just
Okay, then-
take whatever's passed on your dad.
They ain't gonna get much. But yeah, no, I would be, so, from what I
Well-
can understand, one, we're okay with one without.
The only thing, I'm just gonna bring up the question, if we don't have that CDC part in there, is that,
So the deal here is, so basically the main thing is, so to follow Department of Health guidelines and recommendation related to, now this part that's italicized, that's a specific document released by the Department of Health. So even though it says CDC in there, the reason it says that in there is because it's a combination of what the CDC is saying in conjunction with what the Department of Health is saying.
So we want to actually have to get rid of that.
So, right, because the first part, to follow the Department of Health guidance. So whatever the Department of Health guidance is on that particular topic, so when we're talking about quarantining, that's what we'd be following. So if the Department of Health in, say, 3 weeks comes out and says, okay, we're changing how we wanna look at that specific topic, then we would change how we look at it because we've just dictated that we're gonna follow what the Department of Health says on that topic, so.
Okay, so then,
Yeah, I guess I just don't like how it's worded, excluded based on current CDC and Department of Health guidance. That is me taking it from both.
Well, I mean, I guess
Not.
what we could just do is we could say, rather than citing that specific document, you could say, follow Department of Health guidance and recommendation related to temporary exclusion from school due to COVID-19. And then,
I like that better.
and then you wouldn't have to, do it as far as the other stuff goes.
all right, do you want to make a motion then?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Slade, second by Corey. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Require motion to approve resolution declaring all Freeman School District as critical infrastructure workers.
So, this was kind of a topic that, when we had our daily meetings with the hospital here in town, we've talked about quite a bit over the course of the last month. So basically what we're doing here, the federal government has kind of dictated a list of workers from specific areas that they consider to be critical infrastructure, or more or less what they're saying is your business, your company, whatever you have, is not capable of functioning if these people would have to be gone. So in August, I think it was early August, they added teachers to that, or well, actually they added education in general, educators or workers in the school building to that list. And if you took a look at that resolution that our attorney gave us, that I sent out, I don't remember if it was earlier today or if it was yesterday.
I think it was early this morning.
So basically, what it does is it says, we're gonna take advantage of the fact that educational workers can be considered critical infrastructure. And in that resolution, it basically dictates a list of things that employees that would be considered close contacts of COVID-19 would have to follow if they want to continue working. So essentially, say for example, Shane has his wife test positive. Obviously, well, I guess I don't know, maybe I used that example. I don't know if you'd be close contacts or not. But
We gotta keep them.
so, but, more than likely, he's gonna be considered a close contact, or living in the same house, you know, so on and so forth. Now, if he would be asymptomatic, or he's not exhibiting the temperature, you know, the cough, the sore throat, any of that stuff, we would allow him to continue coming to work, based on what's written in this resolution. So what he would have to do is, he would have to remain asymptomatic. He would be subject to multiple screenings throughout the day. He would be monitored regularly, you know, which kind of falls in that for symptoms. He would be required to wear a mask at all times while in the workplace for 14 days since his exposure. You know, there's directives in here to maintain 6 feet of social distancing as work duties allow. And he would be responsible for cleaning different areas after he used them. And then basically, if at any point he becomes symptomatic, he's required to leave the building automatically, and we get a hold of the Department of Health and figure out what we're gonna do from there. Now, here's the deal, when we talk about this at the hospital, I'm not particularly a huge fan of this idea, but basically, almost every other school district in the area is doing the same thing, out of fear of what happens if we end up with 6 or 7 teachers that maybe, or workers of any type, that end up as close contacts. And now we try to figure out how we're gonna keep the school building open and going with that many people gone, because we don't have the subs to be able to handle it. I look at it more from, you know, I hope that doesn't happen, and obviously if it would, we'd have to, you know, figure out how we're gonna handle that. I look at it from a perspective of it gives us a little bit of flexibility. You know, if you remember when Dr. Hafiz was here and talked about when he talked about viral load a lot and, you know, the level of exposure and some of that stuff. I think there's a lot of variability in how somebody could be considered a close contact. And if you get the specific details of how that works, that would make me a lot more comfortable in deciding that I might have Shane continue to come to work, or depending on the specific position that that person holds, whether we would continue to have them coming to work. You know, it's extremely possible that we end up with an employee that is considered a close contact. We just look at the whole scenario and say, it just doesn't make any sense to have that person come in. But we would have the option to do it if we felt it was absolutely necessary. So there's pros and cons to doing it. Obviously, if you bring a person in that's been exposed, you run the risk of exposing other people if they actually end up getting it. But you also might be faced with a situation where the only way to keep the building open is to try to operate under this, because we just don't have enough people to come in and fill it. So, you know, you can do whatever you want on that. Like I said, I'm kind of in between on it. I understand why we would do it, and I know Shane and I have had a lot of conversations about why it's not a good idea. But, like I said, I think there is some merit to doing it, as long as you're gonna follow the regulations that are in the actual resolution for monitoring and making sure that you're, you know, constantly making sure those people are, you know, A, doing what they're supposed to do, but B, not showing any symptoms that would potentially put everybody else in that situation.
I have a more difficult time for staff members that were exposed that deal with multiple grades. You take my position, I'm in contact with every kid up throughout the day. I don't think I'd be a good candidate if I was exposed to maybe my entire elementary. I think maybe it'd work a little better as an elementary classroom teacher that's just with her kids versus someone in the resource room that's with six different, you know, students throughout different grade levels and possibly expose it that way. That's just my thought.
Are we set up where we could do reverse remote learning? Or, you know, if we, let's say we have 10 teachers that are exposed and they can't come in. It's just not, the viral load exposure is too high. They can teach a classroom from their home and the students would come in, or would it just be they're at home, students are at home?
So,
Health said something that they have to be able, or, you know, not ill to.
Well,
I'm not assuming they have it, but
Yeah.
let's say their kid has it at home or
Yeah.
something like that, where they're not
So,
showing any symptoms.
in theory, yes. The problem we would run into is if we have 6 teachers, staff members, whatever they might be, that are close contacts, probably feel well enough to work, but we don't feel comfortable having them in the building. The issue is going to be, you know, we could set their class up in the classroom, the teacher could be projected onto whatever. It's gonna be the issue of, do we have enough people here that can actually supervise those kids while they're in the classroom, while this stuff is going on? Because you know, obviously the teacher would be there remotely and more than likely be able to tell what's going on, but you still have to have somebody there to try to manage, you know, behaviors and different things. that are-
You don't want to put them on alarm system, is what you're saying.
Right.
Not my kindergarten.
Oh, so let's say, like, worst case scenario, something like this happens, and you moved people around, our paras and or subs that we're able to get. How many teachers can we manage to have missing and still function as a school?
What's our breaking point?
Well, I think some of it probably depends on who and when. You know, at your end of the building,
I could take quite a few, it's just we wouldn't have title services and.
right, I think with paras at that end of the building, you can pull them from some of their other duties and have that person there to supervise. At this end, we have a couple paras.
I mean, when we had the capability to, and I know if it was on this end, it would stink for that end, but if we had to.
Pull a para
Pull
from
paras,
there.
I mean, like.
I would say, what do you think, like 5? 6,
As long as
maybe?
none of my parents are close contacts, you know.
Right, so that's, you know, if you're just strictly talking about teachers, you know, maybe 5 or 6, you would have the ability to supervise, but again, the issue you have there is there'd be other kids missing out on services, you know, individual services because.
Right.
So, I mean, it's doable. I think it's probably a little bit easier to manage at this end. You know, you give a kid their laptop and some headphones, and, you know, we could put multiple classes in, you know, area where they can be supervised, but, you know, then you would also run the risk of, if I'm missing an 8th grade teacher, a sophomore teacher, and a senior teacher, and my plan to remedy that situation is to throw all of those kids in the same room. Now we have some other issues that we're dealing with because of that, you know.
I think the scenario you're talking about, in order set, is probably more for the elementary, because I think at the high school, these kids probably, I mean, they're capable of learning from home on that format where my kids aren't. A, because they don't have the supervision at home, or they're too young, but, I mean, at the high school level, I think you're remote, the kids learning at home remotely is probably a lot more doable.
And I don't know what they're saying either, like right now, so, you know, based on the scenario that you're outlining, say we have 6 teachers that end up as close contacts. At one point, they were saying, was it like 25 5% of people that get the coronavirus are asymptomatic, and it might even be higher than that. If you start talking about the percentages there, you know, you might have 3 of them of those 6, you know, 2 or 3 of those 6 that are gonna have symptoms anyway. It's not gonna matter what we have here, they're gonna have to stay home. But that would be a scenario where being able to have the flexibility to maybe bring in 2 or 3 of the other ones might benefit you, because then you only need to use 2 pairs or 3 pairs to try to cover that. You know, in addition, you know, we do have people helping out as far as subs go, but I think right now we got like 3 subs.
And we got 1 sub in quarantine.
So, well, I should say 2 subs and then 1 that can come 2 days a week. So, I mean, there's not a lot of flexibility on that end.
So just to cut straight to the chase here, if we declare these people as critical employees, that gives us the option to shuffle some people in and have them teach regardless of what.
I think my thought is, and my plan, and I think Shane would probably agree with this, is we wouldn't really want to use this unless we absolutely had to. You know, if we have 1 teacher that ends up in close contact, it's probably easy enough to cover that, you know, reverse remotely like we were talking
Sure.
about. So then we don't have to worry about putting people in that situation where somebody could have it or maybe not have it. It'd more be a situation like Kyle explained, you got 6 or 7 teachers or staff members that are all out at the same time. Okay, now we might be looking at a situation where we have to do something a little bit different in order to keep things going as far as.
And that's after the school district already.
Does this have any financial ramifications as far as the school district's concerned?
No, so they expanded FMLA, the Family Medical and Leave Act, because of all this COVID stuff. So basically, teachers are allotted more leave due to COVID than they would have before. And I guess on that end, we don't really have much of a choice. I mean, to be honest with you, if somebody ends up being out 14 days because of COVID, they don't necessarily have to use their own leave that they've accumulated due to the way that they've changed that federal law. So I guess if you look at it that way, you know, we might be missing out on a little bit of money because we're still paying that staff member for not being here, plus we have to find somebody to cover that classroom.
Okay.
But there's not really any way around that.
Right.
So if you look at it from that perspective, if we didn't have to have the teachers stay home for the 14 days, bring them in, then you wouldn't be paying that sub.
Correct.
The extra 14, you know, well, it's not gonna be 14 because you're spread out, but you're probably looking at anywhere from 8 to 10 days of extra pay there, so. So it can save you a little bit on that end.
So Shane, since you're a little more leery, I'll ask you more. If we were to adopt this, would you feel comfortable, and just for other people that would prefer that probably not happen in the school, we took safety precautions, like I've seen things where like they've built things where like we can make a box out of like shower curtains or something to attempt to.
I think, my understanding is all of that doesn't matter if you're within the 15 minutes of
Right.
exposure. I think basically what Kevin's saying is, if there's a risk to adopt this, if you were gonna follow it to the T, but I think what he's asking is, maybe adopt it so we have that tool if we have to use it. I don't think it's a great tool. If you don't have to use it, I surely wouldn't be putting people that are exposed in classrooms with kids. But we might get to a catastrophic situation where we don't have a choice, and at least if you adopt it, then we've got that tool in our toolbox to use.
I think we're looking forward to a scenario, like you said, like the 2 options we have on the table are we either try to use this and get some people in the building, or we basically say, well, we're gonna have to go remote for a couple of weeks until we can get our staff back up to somewhere we wanna go. And I think if it comes down to the 2 of those things, I would guess majority of people, and I could be wrong, would probably be in favor of doing that as opposed to their kid being home for 2 weeks and having to try to do that stuff all over again.
Right.
So Like you said, it's something to have in your back pocket if you need it. I'm not extremely wild about it either, but I do understand why people would want to do it, so.
I guess I would be in favor of adopting it then, and maybe not necessarily following it to a T.
Yeah, I feel good about it if you guys are given the flexibility, if there's situations that maybe you look at the viral load situation and it's like, this one is a lot different than this one. And, so I'd feel fine with it then.
Truth be told, even if we, pass this, if it gets to the point where there's 6 teachers in the community that have people at home with it, that's probably gonna be in a lot more homes in the community. We're gonna have students and things to worry about too, to go remote at that point anyway, so the odds of us needing this aren't real great, but yeah, it's nice to have it as an option.
Okay, so then we need a motion to approve adopting it, but not necessarily following it, correct? Is that how you want that stated?
Well, we would have to approve the resolution.
Just approve it, and then we don't have
And then
to
in
say
good
that we're
faith.
not, we don't have to
And in
say
good
that we're
faith.
not following it to a T. Correct.
Yep, and I think that's gonna be, a lot of it's gonna be a conversation amongst us and the staff members in question.
It'll depend on who the staff member is.
Okay, do we have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Mark,
Second.
second by Slade. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. And that moves us to our next.
Just the right time, Tom. I forgot you were asking about a projector too.
Yeah. I stapled these together like a turd, so I apologize. They're flipped like upside down, so they're in the right order. When you turn the page, it's like upside down and stuff. I've got a copy machine. There.
Are you taping?
It's just streaming for the,
Where is it okay to stand?
you can stand it, it's not a big deal.
Can I do it? What's your policy here?
If you're comfortable, you can pick it up.
Because my glasses will fog up if I don't.
You can.
You can either read or breathe, those are your 2 options.
Yeah. And I am a little paranoid because I have diabetes, but, and I'm not as young as I used to be, but we're pretty spread out here. Well, thank you for the opportunity to come in and present your action plan here. This has been a lot longer process than we intended in the beginning, thanks to COVID. I'm not shocked that when I walked in, that's what you guys are talking about. I'm assuming that was a conversation about essential employees. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is, I know you've probably been here a long time. I'm trying to get through this as quickly as possible. I don't know if you've had a chance to review this at all before tonight.
I did send it to him last week after I got back from.
Okay, well, basically, long story short, after doing the surveys and reviewing all of that data, then we had focus group meetings where we met with internal staff, faculty and staff, and then external parent community members, and came in, and we went through what were the 3 areas that really came to the forefront as a result of the survey and the conversations with them. And we really came up with 3 areas: academics, facilities, and communication. And then basically what this action plan does, it's supposed to be a working document for you and the administration to follow until you've met these goals in here. And we try not to ever put anything in here that's not measurable, so that basically the board can decide 6 months, 12 months, 18 months down the road, how did we do on this? Did we meet these goals? Who was responsible to report out on this? We've got the individual responsible, and then the projected completion date. Now, of course, all of this is in flux depending on what happens with school. Are you in session? Are you out of session? What have you? But I don't really want to read all of these in detail and bore you to tears, but I just want to highlight a little bit. The district will conduct an in-depth data retreat to review graduation rates, test scores, curriculum alignment, disciplinary and behavior issues, etc., every other year, to have a detailed data retreat. And in conversations with folks, really haven't had, an in-depth data retreat. And you'll notice there on the right in highlighted yellow, we have Jen Lowry from T written down there. I don't know if you can get Jen Lowry to help you with that, or one of her staff members, but they are absolutely the best that I know of in the state at doing these data retreats. And the whole idea of it is to look at your existing data and find out where there are holes there so that we can improve teaching and learning and ultimately improve test scores. That's what that's all really designed for. And then whatever you come up with from that data retreat, your professional development then for the next year or next 2 years is based on that. Rather than kind of doing a shotgun approach, which a lot of times we do with professional development, hey, this seems like a good idea, I heard somebody else is doing this, let's try that. Your professional development is actually driven by what information you get from the data retreat. And so it works out really well. An advisory council will discuss and provide input on all past and future professional development. And you're thinking, well, who's the advisory council? We're going to get to that in a minute on communications. Board will consider a specific budget line item for PD. If you don't already have that in the budget, I would highly recommend that you have a number in the budget each year for professional development. And that's both for the administration, what they want to drive as professional development, but it also might be for a teacher that comes to one of the administrators and says, hey, I've seen this workshop, it's outstanding, I want to go to that. Well, if you've already got a budget, it's a lot easier for the board or for the administration to say yes, rather than having to come to the board and get it approved and try and figure out what line item of the budget we're going to take that out of. The district will assess existing technology integration and provide PD where necessary. We found out so much through online learning and COVID that some staff members are really good and jumped right on board with teaching online. Some are not so good. For instance, I would have fell into that category of not being so good at that because technology is not my deal. But most of your younger teachers are probably really good at it, and the ones that got a little more gray in their hair like me, probably not so much. I mean, I'm generalizing. I'm sure you've got some older ones that are really good, but generally speaking, that's how that works. And so getting the right technology integration into the classrooms and working with your tech coordinator to do that. The district will assess ESL programming and determine if more PD is required. ESL, English as a second language. More and more our districts are getting students that English is not their primary language. The state has all kinds of rules and regulations on how quickly, as a school, we got to get that student up to speed in speaking the language fluently. And so this came up through survey responses and when meeting with the focus groups, that we need to at least take a look at that to make sure that we're checking all the boxes as it pertains to ESL. District will consider implementing a formal mentoring program for all new hired teachers with compensation for the mentor. Doesn't have to be a lot, but some kind of compensation. And again, we have May of 21 in there because, again, that's a budget line item. And if the board says we absolutely can't afford that, that's not something we can do, understood, then that has to be taken off the action plan. But a formal mentoring program, and again, there are districts out there that have these. You don't have to recreate the wheel and start from scratch. You can beg, borrow, and steal from another district that's doing this. We lose most of our teachers in the first 3 years, and the biggest share of them in the first 5 years. And most of that is because it's not that they're terrible teachers. Now, granted, we always find that there's just not a good fit or whatever, but most of them get out of the profession early because they're so overwhelmed, and we really didn't provide them with a really good mentor. So, again, don't have to recreate the wheel. Those programs are out there. Principals and teachers will hold each other accountable to ensure all are following the rules and regulations set forth in district policy and handbooks to ensure consistency. So we heard this from both your faculty and staff and from your students, that they didn't feel like discipline was as consistent as it should be, and/or rules were followed as consistently as it could be. So I'll just give you the simplest example. Hats aren't allowed in school. But there's 2 teachers that never enforce that rule. And the kids know it, so they wear hats in that class. I'm just giving an example. I have no idea what your hat policy is, by the way.
It's a great example.
2 teachers don't enforce it because it's like, yeah, it's not, as long as they're learning science, I don't care. As long as they're learning my math, I don't care. It's not a big deal. In fact, I like wearing a hat. Well, if you have that policy and those teachers aren't enforcing it, now you have other teachers who think they're the bad guy. You have kids who wear the hat in that class. They don't get disciplined for it. Then they forget to take it off and they wear it into the next class and they get disciplined for it. Well, Mr. Jones or Mrs. Smith didn't make me take it off, and on and on and on. Well, that is the same case with all of your discipline rules. If your staff aren't going to enforce them, you've got a problem. And it's really hard to hold kids accountable if as adults we're not consistent. So that's why it says in there that principals and teachers will hold each other accountable to ensure all are following rules and regulations. Number 8, district will review Flyer Fridays to, no, I got the wrong form here. Did we eliminate that?
No, we left it on.
Oh, that's right.
We just reworded it.
That's right. District will review Flyer Fridays to ensure they are used to the fullest benefit of our students. So there were some questions about Flyer Fridays and a concern maybe that we weren't, in some people's minds, we weren't getting as much out of it as we possibly could. And so we said, you know what, we're not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater here, but we're going to take a look at it and review it. Are we doing everything we possibly can to make those days as effective as they possibly can be? I know for a fact, working with other districts that have some form of a 4-day week. It could be an occasional 4-day week like you guys have, to a full-fledged 4-day week. And a lot of times the complaints come in, they're really not complaining about what their real heartburn is. The real heartburn is daycare. But they might say, well, you know, why can't, if my kid has to come in for 2 hours, why don't you just have them come in for the whole day? Or if they have to come in for a half an hour, why not the whole day? It could be that they like the fact that they get a meal on that Friday. And if you don't have school, they don't get a meal. So I just want you to know as a board, sometimes it's not exactly what it appears, but you should review it anyway. And so take a look at it and see, to make sure that everything that you're doing on those days is to the full benefit of your students. District will continue to assess adding facts, that's family and consumer science, or what old guys like me used to call home ec, business internships, CTE, welding, nursing, gifted or accelerated work for high achievers. The district will investigate classes being taught by local businesses. Now, the state changes the rules on that all the time about what can and cannot be done. And I'm not even honestly aware of whether you used to be able to have a guy that ran the local welding shop come in and work with your kids in shop and, you know, welding for an hour. If you could get them to do it, you know, usually they're so busy you can't get them, but a lot of times they need welders, so they're willing to do that. And I don't know, these guys would know better than I do, whether the state still allows some form of that. In the event that they don't, sometimes it's just as easy to send your kids down to the welding shop on an internship or an apprenticeship for an hour a day, maybe not 5 days a week, but 2 or 3 days a week, something like that. So some thinking outside of the box on how to get in. And by the way, Freeman's no different than every district in our state right now. We're all scrambling for what I would call non-core classes, hands-on type classes. Everybody's scrambling to try and find that because there's a need, there's a want, but most cases, A, we can't afford to hire 2 or 3 more teachers, and B, if we could afford to hire them, they're not out there. We can't find them. So we got to get creative and think outside of the box on some of these. Again, this one could cost money, so if this is a non-starter for the board, then, or you gotta modify it to say, we can't look at hiring new, but we can look at trying to get creative locally. You can tweak that. And then number 10, the district will review the website, assess usability, and review adding additional social media. Board members in here are all younger than I am, and you know that your generation and even the generation below you is all communicating differently than we used to. And so we always, as schools, we've got to make sure we stay up to speed with how our parents, particularly our millennial parents, how they communicate. And it's typically not by email, it's by Facebook, it's by Instagram, all those things that I know nothing about, but I know that that's factual. That's the feedback we get from them. They want to be communicated in those forms. And so it's our responsibility as a school to do that. And you might think, well, why is that under academics rather than under communication? Because it involves school personnel to make sure we stay up to date. Number 2, communication. Superintendent will conduct an all-staff meeting once per month during the school year to give board meeting updates and cover calendar items for the upcoming month. This will be in addition to the scheduled weekly principal meetings. So we found this to be highly effective in other school districts, if you're not already doing it, to have the superintendent meet with the entire staff, that's classified and certified staff, K through 12, monthly. Because so much misinformation gets out there if you don't do that. Oh, I heard this happen at the board meeting, or I heard that happen at the board meeting, or somebody misinterprets what one of the board members says. And so it's a good opportunity for the superintendent to explain, here's what went on at the board meeting, here's what's coming up for the next month, making sure that the right hand knows what the left hand's doing, and it provides an opportunity for your staffs, because they tend to get in silos. You got the elementary staff over here, and the secondary staff over here. This gets them in the same room 12 times or 9 times a year. The other advantage is that once the legislature starts, the superintendent then can start updating the staff on the legislature and what they're doing as it reflects on education. What I'd like to do when I was doing them is also keeping the staff up to date on what's coming down the pipe financially. And what I found is it made our negotiations be a one-night, 1-hour session. Here's the proposal from the board. They give their proposal. The staff understands after a year or 2 of doing this, the board's given us everything they possibly can. We're not going to play cat and mouse. Here it is. Take it or leave it. And they knew what was coming. They had a pretty good idea because once a month in December, January, February, the superintendent was able to say, looks like we're going to get 1%. And that translates into this many dollars, and there's 45 teachers, and you do the math. And we also got to take care of our classified employees and our administration. So, superintendent will create an advisory council. We talked about this. Advisory council would just meet quarterly or 3 times a year. Superintendent picks an elementary staff, a secondary staff, a middle school staff, if you're broken up that way, a couple of classified employees, and meets with them quarterly to bounce things off of. It could be professional development, it could be discipline policies, anything that's going on. And it's more of a one-on-one session where those people will share. I also encourage the elementary staff, if you've got a heartburn issue, tell your advisory committee member to bring it up at the advisory council meeting. And then, a lot of times what will happen is the superintendent will explain to them, yeah, I get why you don't like having recess duty, but here's why we have to do that. Now, we could go out and hire a recess monitor for all day, every day, and that would cost us about $25,000. And oh, by the way, that's how much raise we're getting from the state. So you guys can take 0 raise and we can hire you a recess monitor. I'm picking on elementary teachers. I don't intend to do that. I'm just trying to make an example of things that you can ward off during an advisory council meeting that might be percolating out there, and you can just stop a lot of that. And that improves the culture of your school. More communication. Teachers will communicate during building principal meetings as to professional development needs and better collaborate with each other. So there was a lot of questions about effective professional development that came up from the internal group. And so I asked the question, well, how often have you brought this up to the administration? Well, no. Well, they're not mind readers. So we're putting it in here that the teachers need to communicate where they feel like they need more professional development. Teachers will be more consistent and diligent in following up with parent questions and concerns. We covered this a lot. So we do some work with the DISC personality profile, and you've all probably heard of or taken a personality profile, Myers-Briggs or DISC or whatever. But what we know is teachers have S personalities, predominantly S personalities, which means they're great with people, they're great with kids, but they abhor conflict. They hate conflict. And so what happens is a parent will call them and or email them and question them on something. And they may reply back to the person who got a hold of them and say something to the effect of, well, I wasn't aware of that, I'll check on it and get back to you. And then they may even check on it, but they're not very good at getting back to them. And of course, you know that there's nothing more irritating than to have somebody where you filed a complaint, if you will, and they said they'd follow up with you and they don't follow up. And then what happens is that percolates up. It percolates to board members and to administrators. And that's where we want to stop it, right at that level. Most of the time, 90% of these calls or these concerns can be addressed if the teacher will simply return the call and get back to them. It might be as simple as saying, look, I checked it out and I checked both sides of the story. By the way, here's the rest of the story and here's what happened. Now, or it might be, yep, you were right, I checked it out, there was some discipline that I had to hand out, I can't tell you what, that's illegal, I can't tell you that, I can just tell you it's been taken care of. In either case, usually the parent is like, thank you, because 2 or 3 days have passed and they've cooled down and they're just glad you got back to them. So we spent quite a bit of time talking with the staff about following up. The district will be more consistent and diligent in making sure parents and community members are communicated with in their preferred mode. We talked about that. And then lastly, facilities. And some of this, I apologize, some of this I believe you're either on or you've maybe already taken care of or you got it on your docket. Assess. And you'll notice most of these say assess because they deal with money, and we're not going to dictate in an action plan that the board spend money. This is your call. Assess all parking lots, sidewalks, and curb and gutters. And that would be everything that's on your property. Assess school signage and a marquee reader board. This came up several times in both the surveys and the faculty staff meeting about better signage if, you all live here. And so you all know exactly where the school is and exactly what door to come in if you're a parent coming for a meeting or if you're coming to a ball game. But many people don't. And so better signage either on town and on Main Street to how to get to the school. And then once you get here, better signage on which is the right door to come in. Obviously I think most everybody comes in this door for just about everything. And then if you wanted to, a marquee reader board. A lot of schools have those with they scroll the upcoming events on there or congratulations, attaboy, and then oftentimes a business or businesses will actually pay for those signs and put their signage on there. Again, that's your call. I get the school signage thing, the marquee reader board, that's kind of depending on how much money you have or who's willing to donate. Look at adding more natural light to the middle school, high school interior rooms. Those, is there just 4 of them?
There's 4 of them.
Yeah, there's 4 rooms interior here that have no light, no natural light. And look at trying to figure out what it would cost to put skylighting in there to bring in some natural light into those rooms. And then assess the ash trees on the property. You got a bunch of ash trees out there, and with the ash borer disease, concern was what happens if they all get afflicted at the same time? Should they be somewhat thinned out and some different varieties put in there, et cetera. So it's not shocking to me that your facilities list is pretty short with the beautiful facilities you have here. Most school districts would be jumping up and down giddy as all they had to do is look at their sidewalks and their curb and gutter. Questions? I know you've been here a long time, and I appreciate you bearing with me there going through that.
I'll just say, and I know you and I talked about it the other day, I did put a motion on the agenda to approve this. But I know you and I had talked about the fact that maybe just take some time to kind of go over it, and then we can put that motion on the next month's agenda. So you have some time to look at it and see if there's anything you want to tweak a little bit.
That would be my recommendation. I usually tell boards, wait a month, because somebody might have watched this on TV and wondered why something was on there or why something wasn't on there. And so you may get some feedback that you could bring to the next meeting. And then, of course, you can adopt it exactly the way it is, or you can edit it and adopt it, or you can throw it away. I mean, it's your call, it's the board's decision. Hopefully, you'll adopt it in some form. And then the key is, honestly, this is really up to the board, is to make sure that people that are responsible for those things, that they get them done, and they get them done in a timely fashion, or that they come to you and explain, this is gonna take 3 more months than we had on here because of X, Y, and Z. That way it will get done. And then I always tell every school, I'll put myself completely out of business, but I tell every school, you don't ever need to really go through this process again with me. Just use this template and add something to a goal for next year on there. If you check 1 box or 2 boxes off there and you want to add something, add it onto that. In fact, you may want to do a survey as a follow-up to some of this to see what your parents are thinking. Are they feeling better about the communication? Well, you can do that survey on your own, very simply. Survey Monkey, send it out. You've got all their email addresses. Send it out and get some feedback from them. So you shouldn't need to see me for this again in the future. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Tom. Thank you. Say, Tom, I did have one question. Would you recommend, I suppose with all these surveys, there was lots of different comments and things like that. Should we as a board look through some of these things that people penned or whatever, or what do you suggest there?
Well, 90% of the time, the board just keeps the data in a safe someplace for 2 or 3 years and throws it away. There have been a couple of boards or board members that said, hey, I want to read them all, and you're certainly capable and willing and able to do that. Just make sure that that data never gets out, because there are people's names in there where, as you would expect, there's narrative questions in there. Everything else is fine. In fact, I printed off a compilation for the focus groups. Well, that was a compilation of all of the true false type, or agree, strongly disagree, that I gave them that data, compiled. But on the narrative, sometimes somebody will say something and they're like, I don't like Mrs. Smith teaching whatever. Well, you can't let that information get out. That's a violation of personnel. And so if you're going to look at it, I would do it, even to protect yourself, set up a time where you can come in on Derek's office, or Kevin's office, and look at it. Because if he sends it to you and you look at it and it gets out, they're going to point a finger at you. So I would just be careful with that. But yeah, absolutely, you can read those, and I mean, I think you'll find that we've addressed. Now, as you would expect, there probably was 40 different little things mentioned one time, and we didn't put much stock in that. But if it was mentioned 4, 5, 6, 7 times, that's on our list. And that's really, you can't get that deep into the weeds for the 40 things that were mentioned one time. But that doesn't mean that the administration hasn't looked at that. Because, you know, that's all important stuff. You want to see that. It might be a communication thing again. That's 90% of the stuff in a school is communication. I've never done one of these in all the strategic plans, never done one where communication isn't a goal. As good as we think we are in doing it, that's not how it's perceived. And in running a school, perception is reality, even if it's not accurate. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for your comments. All right, so we're gonna table.
You're still on.
You're still on for the 30, yeah.
Yes.
And then we're gonna go back to the vote.
Yep, I got that.
Awesome.
Thanks for stopping. All right. And I'll have some, I'll bring some stuff too.
I'm so done with
Okay,
that
awesome.
last
Thank you.
meeting. Approve.
Okay, so we're gonna skip 8, and then we're gonna go to the vouchers.
So you want to table 8 till?
Right, that's what you want, I think.
Yeah, let's look through them all and figure out maybe what we want to attack first on that list.
Well, just creating the list and then we just pretty much sit back.
Yeah.
Okay, so on the vouchers, so we want to discuss, first, I guess, how is that going? Is that easy? Is it not easy?
Christie and I have talked about it a little bit. I don't know that she has much of an issue with it.
Okay. So, last time I did vote not to, and I will, my question is, so we've had JV games on the same night as varsity games. The people that get vouchers for JV games, are they expected to leave after that game?
No.
And why not?
Because I think it would be pretty tough to wander around and figure out who should and shouldn't leave. I mean, we had talked about, especially like in the junior high stuff. You know, I honestly, I don't know that I've supervised a volleyball game yet, so I don't know how
I
many
mean,
people
they all
leave.
show up at different times and they all scatter and get here, it'd almost be impossible without somehow taking a picture and a name and say, oh, this person showed up for JV and, okay, you gotta leave now, I think it's quite impossible.
I did it the first game, and a lot of the people came out of the gym and left.
I mean, a lot of
Just
people leave.
Because I'll say this, and I've heard it from people, and I tend to agree, if we're gonna allow the JV people to stay for the, or the, not JV, junior high people to stay for the varsity game, personally, I think that everybody should be here. That's my personal feeling.
The other option could be that, I mean, everyone's gotta exit the gym at
Well,
5:30. If you can't show up till 5:30, then everyone's gotta come back in, you have to have high school versus JV vouchers, I mean, that'd be about the only way to distinguish them all.
And some of those people, I'm assuming too, would be like my family, where we have middle school,
Well-
all the way, you know, up to varsity,
Well,
you know.
but I will, and the, you know, and then then the questions I ask is, like, do JV kids, like, for instance, you've got daughters that are in JV, he's not getting 4 more tickets, he's just getting 4 tickets, correct?
Yeah, it's 4 tickets per roster,
Per night, not per roster.
per rostered participant. So if you have, unless you have multiple people in the same family, then you get 4, right? We talked about that, I think, the first time around. I think
Right,
Cody-
so if you have a 7th grader and a freshman, you get 8 tickets?
Get 4. That was my understanding, although I guess Crystal's been the one handing them out, I don't know if she's been given, like, if, you know, if you have a junior high daughter, maybe if you get 4 for that, and then if you get a different 4 for the high school, if it was just 4. I know we talked about JV varsity.
No, this is why I wanna talk about this, cause I think they're getting doubled, I know they are. And so that's where my problem comes.
Because I know we talked about, I think originally when you brought up was just the JV varsity deal, you know, I have a daughter that plays JV and I have a daughter, or something to that effect. We talked about that. I'm guessing maybe there's some confusion in terms of junior high. And then actually looking to see if any of those people have siblings on the high school side.
Right, and so while it's petty, people are watching that stuff, and so like, I do think that is something that either needs to be cleaned up, or I think we need to have everybody allowed to come. That's my personal feeling, and so that is how I would vote if we were to re-vote on how many we're gonna give out. The idea was to keep as few people here for the game as possible. And so if we're not going to just do junior varsity and varsity, people allowed in gym only. I don't care if there's a JV game that night, whether we have played in a different gym, we have multiple sets, then we have to do it that way. But if we're not going to do that, I feel.
I'm assuming that was nothing more than an oversight when the tickets were handed out. I mean, I don't think it was something that was intentional. My guess would be that Christie asked the junior high volleyball coach, how many kids do you have? Gave each of them their 4 tickets, and then we didn't think about the fact that they could potentially have, you know, a high school kid there. So I mean, that's something that's,
8 tickets in?
something that's easily fixable. So I said we just hold it out.
Yeah.
To be honest, I think I'm kind of in favor, I'm kind of leaning that way too.
The people that are scared aren't going to come anyway. They're scared of getting COVID. They're not going to come to the game. And I don't think we're going to pick up that many more people. I just don't think so.
When you go to these other away games,
Yeah, like Howard, they had no vouchers.
You don't have-
It wasn't packed by any means.
I
no,
even watched the Gayville bowling game and volleyball, there wasn't.
I just don't, and that's, especially going into harvest, you're gonna have a lot of agriculture people and people that work in agribusiness that are gonna be struggling to try to get to the game anyway, so I think our kids need all the support they can get. So I'm of the opinion to open it up.
Opinion?
I guess, I mean, if there's an I guess, my opinion would be if, you know, if the voucher system isn't being followed in the first place, we just as well do it. But if we're gonna crack down and say, okay, this is the way it's gonna be, we're gonna follow the voucher system, and it's gonna be black and white from here on out, I guess, you know, I'm in favor of the voucher system if they crack down on it, make sure it's all done correctly. But we can't have any oversight.
Sure. My question for you would be, you know, so if you're gonna open, well, I guess if you're gonna tweak something here, so the way that we had it set up was, you know, green, yellow, red, like everything else. So, you know, the whole idea was, let's try to minimize the number of people that come in, because we assume this is gonna get worse before it gets better, or so on and so forth.
Right.
So, I'm just speculating here, and I don't know for sure. You know, obviously I sent out that message this morning or over the weekend or last night. You know, received word that we had kind of our first group of kids that were named as close contacts, and, you know, we have some of that stuff going on. My guess would be it's only a matter of days, you know, maybe longer, before we get our first actual case in the building. So the way that we have that set up is, once we get the first case in the building, then it's parents only for the indoor events. So I guess long story short, is if you're gonna change that whole process, you might as well just say, we're not gonna follow a spectator plan then, because if we start tweaking this and tweaking that and so on and so forth, it gets really super convoluted in terms of trying to figure out what we're gonna do in each scenario. So, because I mean, if we're gonna say we wanna, you know, we don't wanna do with vouchers, we wanna open it up, which is kind of what we had in that, you know, green phase or whatever, then, you know, end of the week, we end up with a confirmed case somewhere, and we end up saying, okay, we're gonna transition to our yellow phase of our main plan, which means we're gonna transition to the yellow phase of our spectator plan, you know, then all of this is kind of like, it doesn't really matter.
Right, you're right, it doesn't really matter. but like, so I guess,
So in the grand scheme of things, you know, just if you're gonna make that, are you gonna adjust the rest of it? Or if you're gonna say that anybody can come in, you know, to the indoor events, you're probably better off just saying, you know, we're gonna make a motion to say that we're not going to have a spectator flag. And then basically everybody could come, or as long as they wanted to come, and you wouldn't have to worry about adjusting anything along the way. Or are you gonna stipulate, you know, you wanna get rid of vouchers and open everything up in the green phase, but then what are you gonna do during the yellow phase? And if we don't like the way that the voucher system is working, then it probably wouldn't make any sense in the yellow phase to say we're gonna start using vouchers when we get there because.
right, in the yellow phase, the only people allowed are parents.
Correct.
So.
And we had actually talked a little bit about if you still wanted to have like high school student body, you could probably do it, but there'd probably have to be some type of mask requirement there.
But, so I don't think, so I'm not necessarily, I don't, like, I'm in favor of opening it up to everybody, because I think the voucher system, and we're a weekend and it's already, we're allowing, for instance, to have 8 tickets, well, that's not just a small oversight, I don't think. That's, like,
I
this
don't
is
think
enough
somebody
to-
was purposely giving all the.
I'm not saying somebody was purposely giving it, but I'm saying, like, people are already annoyed about not just the school, but the whole COVID thing in general, and all it takes is a small thing to make people irate. And I think this is something that from people I have talked to have been very, very disappointed in how that was, and like, why am I not able to go if you're allowing that?
Yes, I mean, so like I said, if that's the issue, I mean, you can just say, we don't want to follow the spectator plan, and everybody can come, and then you don't have to worry about, you know, okay, we let everybody in, and by Thursday, we end up with a case, and now all of a sudden, we're transitioning next week to parents only, which, you know, based on what you're saying, people are, you know, frustrated about the way things are anyway, so if we open it up for 3 days or 4 days, or whatever it happens to be, and then all of a sudden you get a case, and now we're gonna bump it back to, you know, parents only, I would assume that that frustration is gonna get worse, because you just, you know, basically went from this to now everybody can do it, back to now it's even more restrictive than it was before.
I don't, okay, so I don't think it's necessary, I don't think just watching people watch it and say, how did so-and-so get a ticket? And then they'll say, oh, they have a junior high kid, and it's like, well, why are they allowed to go? And so I don't think it's necessarily that they're not necessarily allowed to go to the game, from what I've understood. It's more that they're like, if you're gonna allow them to stay for a varsity game, that is, to them, well, then I should be allowed. And I can't say I totally disagree with that. Does that make sense?
So it kind of back to what Will said, that, I mean,
Right,
if
I
you want somebody to go through and like clear out the gym after.
I supervised the game, and it was about impossible to get varsity.
No, I read it.
Early, I
And-
mean, it would be impossible to, without kicking everyone out, and then at 5:30, the gym was over.
Right, I understand that.
So, I get what you're saying too.
Like, so I don't know, like, I don't want to make it necessarily tougher on you, but if we're not going to, like, if it wasn't cracked down or whatever right away, like, I just feel that was, like, then I think it's probably easier to just open it up and let people come if they want to come. And then it's less work trying to kick people out or whatever. But I don't think we have to necessarily totally trash the whole.
Green, yellow, red.
Right. I think there's still a spot where if we get a couple cases and then you go to yellow.
It just takes one case.
I don't think so.
I thought it said it was.
That's
and I'll-
a decision that we have to make.
that he
It's
gets-
funny because I actually went back and watched the end of the last meeting, we talked about that specific thing at length, about, when we were talking about all the masks and all that stuff, and that's kind of what we said, is that, you know, once we get a case in the building, then we.
I think if I remember right, what I said was, if we have one case and you decide to go to yellow, I'm going to back that. But I think it also states that, I think how it's written is not just a specific case. If I remember right, it was if we have spread through the school. But anyway, like, I'm not opposed to if you're going to do one person, like, that's fine, and I don't care. But I just think, like, I don't think that it's a big deal if we go to yellow and then it's just parents only. And if that's what it is, then that's what it is. I don't, that's.
So are we saying that you want to keep the voucher system, but you just want to make sure that if you have a junior high kid and a high school kid, that you don't get double the tickets, and that we need to make sure that we're having people leave after the junior high, or we're just saying that we don't want to do vouchers at all, and we want to let everybody in, but then when we go, if we end up in a yellow situation, that we're okay with going back and saying parents only.
Right, I guess I don't understand why that's, what's the big deal of just going to parents only if that's how it's written?
I mean, I don't have a problem going to parents only, I'm just saying based on, if we're talking about people being frustrated about limiting the access the way it is, and then we make a decision to open it up, which, you certainly can do, but then in a short turnaround time, we end up going backwards anyway.
Right, but so say we have one case, we go to yellow, 14 days later, we've not had any, I'm assuming our plan is to go back to green.
Right, I mean, the whole idea would be they'd be interchangeable, right? If we, we get that one case and we take care of all that stuff, then we figure out where we're at. So basically, okay. Let me just think about how to explain this, man. So with the green, you either want to open it up to everybody, or, be more consistent with the vouchers.
Correct.
Leave yellow the way it is.
Right.
With the whole idea that if we get to yellow, there's the possibility that we would go back to green at some point in time, in which we would say we'll open up to whatever that is.
Correct.
Okay.
I mean, right, I don't think we're going to yellow and we're stuck in yellow for the rest of the year.
I hope not.
Right, so I mean, so yes, my idea is just to either, and I don't care, if you guys want to enforce kicking everybody out or using the other gym and everybody exits through the doors over there and enters through the doors, well, I don't care if we want to go that way, or if you want to just open it up because that's easier, I'm okay with, I'm talking specifically just how the vouchers have to be handled, how we have to do that. I think that's petty, but I think it's also, people are.
We've been down this path before, so I won't rehash my arguments on some of this stuff. But the other thing I haven't really brought up that I would be a little concerned with is, if you want to open it up to more people, it's fine, but I think having elementary and middle school age kids come creates another issue there, when you're looking at potential for contacts across multiple grade levels and some of that stuff.
Well, a lot of them have vouchers, so it's already happening.
Right, but not as many as you would get if you just say you'd open up to the entire elementary.
There's a lot of elementary kids that parents drop them off at the door. They come into the game and the parents go home and come back and pick them up. We don't have that happening right now.
And I think more
Right,
than anything.
but to think there's no crossover is, I mean, it's
No,
happening outside.
and again, we just have to remember that a lot of the stuff we have in place, or a lot of stuff we discussed, has been about minimizing, because it's not gonna be possible to eliminate.
Right.
So, obviously, we wanna try to do what we can on our end to minimize as best we can, understanding that once kids get outside of things that we are responsible for supervising or administering or whatever it may be, we'd like to think people are making, intelligent decisions about how they handle that, but ultimately, we can't, there's not much we can do about that. But that doesn't mean we can't still, use our ability to minimize while people are actually here. So.
And while we're talking in the building, like at football games, I'm assuming there's grade school kids mixed in with high school kids. So like, it's happening there too.
I think you have your argument there as far as outdoor event versus indoor event. you know, based on all that stuff. But yeah, I mean, it's not gonna be possible to completely eliminate it. I just think if you open up that side of it, I think it's gonna create more problems on that end. Because from the beginning, one of the things we talked about is, you know, obviously we don't wanna close the building if we don't have to, you know, regardless of what's going on. So that's why we're doing some of this stuff. But I think it would become a lot more problematic if you have to start closing that end of the building and some of the other stuff along with, you know, and high school is its own animal, 9 through 12. I think that is, you know, managed a lot cleaner than, you know, some of the other stuff would be. So, you know, when we start talking about, you know, I think Marion had a case in one of their elementary classes and had to shut down, you know, the whole class for 2 weeks or whatever it happened to be. I don't know exactly how they're dealing with all of that, but that becomes a little bit more of an issue than, you know, say your 11th grade class up here get a positive case and they're exposed to each other. You know, 11th graders gotta be out of the building for 2 weeks. Well, we can manage that. You know, it's not ideal, but relatively easy compared to if you have to shut 2nd grade down for 2 weeks. So, are you gonna completely eliminate, you know, the fact that you might end up having to close an elementary grade? No. But, you know, I just don't wanna create more situations where they can potentially come together and we don't have a lot of control over that.
And that was maybe my understanding, I don't know, maybe I understood wrong, that there can be various situations if we just have one case that is excluded on one side or over here, or maybe they went home on the weekend and on Monday they woke up. I think there's just a lot of things that, just to say one case, we're gonna go to yellow, I think that's where we were talking about having some board input to keep away from all this, you know, people taking sides and stuff that, you know, we would kind of work at it together and say based on the situation. Maybe I misunderstood, but that was my understanding.
The figure this they're using, especially even at a county level, is 1 per 1,000. That's what smooth Hutchinson County up to substantial community spread. I mean, they're using a different figure, but when you get down to it, 1 per 1,000, it moves you up to substantial.
One person?
1 per 1,000.
So in Hudson County, what is that like?
Well, so it varies because your county, so the CDC and the Department of Health categorize substantial spread by, like he said, they use the ratio 100 cases per 100,000 people, which essentially reduces to 1 per 100,000. You have to be over a certain population to use that ratio to categorize or stuff like that. If your population is under 35,000 in your county, which we're under 35,000, then it's just a set number of cases. So basically, once the active case number in a county that has a population below that number gets above 10, you're considered to be substantial community spread. We actually talked to the hospital about, you know, okay, so part of our district is in Hutchinson County, part of it's in Turner County, and there's a very tiny portion that's in Cook County. You know, there's 10 active cases in Hutchinson County. You know, if none of them are in, because we asked this question, said, well, if we know for a fact none of them are actually in the city of Freeman, or, you know, in our district, does that change how we view substantial spread? And they said no, because you have to take into consideration, the reason they include the entire county is the fact that people aren't necessarily staying within that bubble of Freeman. So, you know, so on and so forth there with all that stuff. You know, and that's, I think we're getting a little, you know, off of what we were
Right.
originally trying to talk about. So I think what we just need to decide here is, you know, if you want to do something different with that, you know, we just need to decide specifically what you want that plan to be, or what you want it to look like. You know, as far as transitioning from green to yellow, that's part of the reason why we have those daily conversations with the hospital, because,
Right.
you know, if we explain a scenario to them and, you know, they basically say, well, you know, it looked like it happened, you know, somebody tested positive on a Monday over the weekend, you know, the number of close contacts you're gonna have is probably gonna be limited compared to if you have somebody test positive on a Thursday when you're looking at 2 days before that. So the scenarios are a little bit different. So, I mean, I would agree that it maybe isn't necessarily one case it takes, you're gonna have to look at the specifics surrounding that to decide, you know, where you're gonna be. I would be very hopeful if we get a positive case, or I think we'd be unfortunate if we get a positive case, if we're able to limit it to just one case, and that's the only one that pops up, you know, in that particular part of the building, so. But anyway, I could ramble off, but back to what we were talking about before. You guys just need to decide what you want to do with that particular issue, spectators at indoor events.
So personally, I think everybody should come, but I also understand the part of safety, so I will kind of push this back. If you guys are willing to kick or use tickets and kick everybody out, or use a separate gym and funnel just back in JV and varsity player, people, like purple tickets get you into there, red tickets get you in here, and you want to do that, I'm okay with that being our plan. But if you're gonna say that's too much work and I don't want to do that, then then my thing would be just open it up and let people come.
Could some of this be lack of awareness too? Like if there's an announcement made between games, you know, if you were here for that specific game, please exit the building now. We need to have the space for people coming for the junior varsity or the varsity game. Maybe a lot of people just don't know they're supposed to leave after that set game. And they're just gonna stick around because they got nothing better to do. It's Thursday night, where else am I gonna go? But if there's an announcement, they know they're supposed to leave, you know, they probably will.
My question to you on that would be is,
How many of you
people,
guys are gonna
my-
stand up and walk out?
people, here would be two people that should probably know that it probably should have just been varsity games are sitting here. Did you call and give 4 tickets back, or did you use all 8 tickets?
Keep putting me on the spot.
No, well, no, well, that's fine. Well, but I'm saying, like, did you, I mean, you know what I'm saying, so like, if we're gonna leave it up to people, like, that should know better, like, does it happen?
Here's where I'm torn. I completely agree with Cody in the sense that if they wanna risk it, let them risk it. You know, that's free country, do what you wanna do. On the flip side of that coin, I wanna keep the school open as long as possible. And if maybe this voucher thing is gonna help accomplish that, maybe we should play ball. And if we need to do some things to get the voucher system to work a little more smoothly, maybe we should try to tweak it instead of completely abandoning it.
Which
That's
that's what
yeah, no, I'm agreeing with you,
So-
I'm also agreeing with Cody, like, I see both sides to
Right,
this.
and I would also agree with you, is we're trying to keep the school open as long as possible.
Right,
That-
like,
that is our whole.
nobody wants to get back
Nobody
there.
wants to.
100%. So like, that's my thing, is if you guys are willing to do that with vouchers, I'm okay with staying with vouchers. But if you're not, then I think we need to open it up to everybody.
You have to understand, everything we do is uncharted territory.
I understand.
And anytime you do something the first time, it's always better when you do it the second time.
Well, and the enforcement issue is obviously the biggest hurdle.
Well, and like Kyle said, you know, okay, so we're gonna have the junior high play volleyball over in the other gym. Okay, so if you have a red or blue, purple ticket, you're gonna go in there and watch those kids play, that'll be over with, that door's gonna be locked, then you exit the building, and anybody that's got a JV, varsity ticket, they're gonna be in here. Most people are not allowed to enter because they don't have the correct ticket. It's one or the other. I mean, it's the only, honestly, it's the only way you're gonna be able to police that.
Right.
Because if they come in through here, and then, like you said, you can announce all you want, but there's always gonna be 2 or 3 people who are gonna sneak, and they're gonna say, well, you know, if we sit here, we're gonna be okay. And
You could literally sit there and say, Kyle Weir, do you have a ticket? And he's gonna sit there and be,
Well, it'd be easier to do it with our people than the visiting crowd. You have no-
well, but they only have so many, I mean, but if you do color tickets, then.
Right.
Also, most people can't sit and watch the visiting crowd and say, you know what I mean? And so like, that, I think that's where it is. And so, as far as my vote, which I will leave up to you guys, however you want it to be, I will go that way. I think that's fair.
Where are you talking about?
The vouchers. If they want to go, my vote, which it kind of seems like we're 2-2, right? And so if you guys want to do the work to keep it just to JV varsity games,
I said I'm technically undecided.
Oh, sorry, okay, but that's how it was in the last one. But anyway, so, and maybe that doesn't even matter if Slade goes the other way, then, but I think that's fair.
It seems like we're policing something where there's not many numbers.
when you go to these away games, there's just not the people there. And to do all this work to say, okay, this 20 people, not to leave now, I just think it's a lot of hassle and a lot of ticket messing around with for a few people that show up. I don't know, I'm like, just keep it simple, just let people come.
Honestly, I think there's a lot more people that would come if you open it up to everybody. I think we have much better following than a lot of other schools. You know, I talked to Larry up in Canastota about a lot of stuff, and he asked us what we were doing, and he kind of said, you know, what you're doing is something that we would probably strongly consider doing during basketball season because of the number of people we get to come to basketball. He goes, right now with us, said volleyball is not an issue because nobody comes to our volleyball games. He said it's just completely night and day. You know, when I look at the games that we've played here at home, you know, I observe that there are a lot of people that typically have come in the past that are not in the stands because of what we're doing. I do think that if you were to open it up to everybody, you would have quite a few more people that would show up. I just don't know with what I've seen, you know, not only here, but just kind of, you know, in the area in general, that the COVID stuff is really gonna keep a lot of people away. I mean, there's some people that are taking it pretty serious, but I just don't know if that's gonna be enough to keep some of them away. And that's why I know, you mentioned Howard and one of the teams, we had that conference meeting back in August that basically just said, you know, we're sending a letter to everybody basically saying, you come at your own risk, and, you know, essentially whatever happens, happens, and if it happens, it's on you. And, you know, basically without saying it, saying we don't really care. Like I've said before when we've had this topic, that bothers me a little bit. Obviously people have the discretion to make their own decisions, but I also think we have a duty to try to be responsible for the safety of others, whether it's in our building or people in the community. Now, that's neither here nor there as far as this goes. As far as some of that stuff, you know, to be honest with you, I'm not a real big fan of having a ton of people in the building because, again, our goal is we want to try to keep the building open as long as possible. But if you're looking for some type of compromise, maybe you just say, if you're an adult, you can come to the games. We would still limit it to students have to have, 9, 12 students still have to show their, ID to get into the game or whatever that happens to be. I would guess you're still gonna see a significant jump in the number of people that show up if you open it up that way. And maybe not, maybe I'm wrong, but, you'd still be keeping the younger kids out and trying to, hopefully maintain what we've been trying to do during the school day, particularly with elementary into the building. But you would be opening it up to more, people that are from school or adults or something, so forth.
I think the question you asked though is, are we willing as administrators to tweak it to get it to work better and fix the problems?
I don't really have a problem with the way that it's going right now, but I think if you're gonna get to the point where you're gonna be chasing people down to try to get them, or you're gonna have to set up, a completely different gym, which has, extremely, smaller capacity than what you have in here anyway, is it really worth the hassle? I don't know. I mean, Christy certainly doesn't have an issue with doing the vouchers and doing all that, because she's kind of getting into the swing of how that stuff works, but if we're gonna start, having to use multiple gyms and trying to filter people this way and that way, or, like you said, you make an announcement, I think there'd be a fair.
I don't think it'd be 100% effective, but I think, oh yeah, I'm not supposed to, I'm supposed to leave that. We probably just don't even know they're supposed to leave.
So, I just think we're gonna get to the point where we're gonna go through all that. You're better off just saying, we'll limit the kids like we have been limiting the kids, and just, if adults wanna come, they come, and I guess if that ultimately ends up being that we got a bunch of kids that end up being, close contact with positive cases and stuff, I guess we just deal with that as we go. I just don't wanna get to a point where, we're talking about jumping through all these hoops, and making people, requiring people to do all this other stuff. You know. that
One
probably
other thing
doesn't-
would be is if you want to compromise, there's a lot of the AA schools do 6 vouchers. And I've heard a lot of people say, well, if we just had that 1 or 2 more, it'd be good. So,
You still be cutting Cody's vouchers down.
is that,
You still be cutting Cody's vouchers down then.
yeah, I know. So that would be the other suggestion.
I know there's a pretty hot black market voucher system in Freeman right now. I mean, are we gonna be taking away people's jobs as far as scalpers go if we adjust this?
Why don't you just do this? Why don't you just say, if you're an adult, it's open to adults. We still say 9 through 12 kids have to have a student ID to get in, so they basically have to be Freeman students or whoever you're playing. And if you are a volleyball player, a rostered player that has a sibling, we will give you a pass for your sibling to come in with your parents.
That doesn't sound too bad.
That's just for green, right?
What?
Just for green.
Yeah, everything changes once it hits yellow.
So that way you're still, you know, because a lot of like sibling, like I'm sure like Luke was using a voucher to come to games or something like that,
Yep.
you know, so you still get to include the kids on the team that would have siblings in younger grades if they want to come, you know, you just give, essentially you're giving them a voucher instead of having to give one to everybody else. So they have to have the pass to get in if they're in K through 8 or whatever it happens to be, and then you just say, rather than messing with trying to tweak the number of vouchers to figure out what's gonna specifically work for everybody without basically just going down the list and saying, how many do you want, how many do you want, how many do you want? We'll just see what happens when we open it up to all adults, and
So the visiting town, we would just make it adults then?
whatever we do for ours, we're gonna have to do for them. I'm not real interested in getting into that with the Activities Association, because I know for a fact it'll get there. It'd probably get there after tomorrow night's game, would be my guess. As far as, well, they're doing that for this people, you know, their own people, but they're not doing it for us. There's nothing that says that has to be a requirement, it's just a recommendation in there, but that's kind of like last spring when the governor recommended that everybody close, but then after the fact, it pretty much said if you wouldn't have closed, you were gonna get a call from the governor's office saying that you actually had to close, so.
Well, maybe it's simpler just to go to 6 then, rather than run risks that you're talking about. Or were you second thinking or not really?
No, I just think, whatever we decide we're gonna do for ourselves, we need to extend that same courtesy to.
I 100% agree with that.
To the visitors, so.
And to be honest, I think if you want to do the adults, I can tell you right now, my wife is watching, she's screaming and saying, don't agree to that, Kyle, because then we still don't go to a game. But I think that's more than fair. And so I would be,
Oh, you mean because you wouldn't be able to bring your kids with you?
because I wouldn't be able to bring my kids with me. Now, we could maybe find a babysitter.
Oh, would the
But-
6 voucher thing be better then, or something?
And, no, well, but
I ain't giving him any of my vouchers.
right, especially that right just cost him 2. Like, but no, I think that's, I think people would be happier with that, and I think that's a more than fair, what do I want to say?
Compromise.
Thank you.
As far as-
And so I personally, I think I'd be in favor of that.
You need to play Scratch tonight now?
Depends on if she's watching, and at some point I will.
Sounds like it, fill up, right?
But,
You got a barn, right?
yeah, that's true, that's true. So, I guess that would be fair to me, I don't know what everybody else thinks on that. Or you can say we
I don't
could.
think either, so that's why I was looking at it.
That's fine. And I know eventually it's gonna hurt your eyes, because it ain't much.
Never had a dog in a fight, so, you know.
And then, we would like to go watch our nieces, but I also understand the city.
You watch your Jesus on TV.
Yeah, we do.
So our options are, don't change anything.
And,
Adults and siblings, 6 vouchers, or those are our 3 options. at this moment.
Or if your last name ends in Y, you can come on days that end in Y, but only.
Or
if-
options.
Hey, why?
And only if the month that those days fall in actually happen to end in a Y also. I think we're to the point where we're splitting hairs now.
Yep.
I mean, like I said, I think, I was all for limiting to begin with, and I still am, but if it's causing that much heartburn with some of that, and again, that's part of the Tom put it in his action plan, being more consistent here with enforcing this, that, and everything else. I think we see that all the time, We have this rule or whatever it's supposed to be, and some people choose to, enforce it, some people don't, and it's a tough thing to do, so it's no different with these vouchers. If either we're gonna go in and we're gonna clear everybody out and direct them and herd cattle around here, or maybe the alternative is, okay, well, we're gonna open it up to adults, we're still gonna allow their siblings to come, it's probably gonna put more people in the gym, we don't know that for a fact, we can speculate, see how it goes. It's probably gonna be a short matter of time before we end up with cases, and we're gonna have to make some other transition anyway. So, is opening it up to more people, but still keeping the same restrictions on kids going to lead to more cases in the building? Your guess is as good as mine. I don't know. I would probably make the argument right now that we've got to this point without having any cases in the building, strictly due to luck as opposed to anything else.
100%.
I do think we have some things in place that are helpful and will help as this gets a little bit worse, but I don't know that they're necessarily preventing us from getting it right now. So.
Trying to read the room. I don't know. What's the most popular option at this point? Mark, you're leaning 6 voucher?
I would say my number one would be open it up. My number 2 is 6 voucher or the cabin plan. That's on the same plane for me. I don't care.
Yeah, I didn't add the open it up as an option, so that would
Option 5.
But if we took you seriously.
Which you should,
All right.
because it's a foolproof plan.
I guess I would lean towards, like you said, the adults and siblings, yes.
Sweet.
I'm okay with it.
So you're not rather fight.
I really don't. Right.
So,
But here's why I haven't heard any public feedback about this
I
at all.
haven't heard.
So I have a hard time when I haven't heard.
Zip. Nobody said
Nothing.
anything.
Yeah, so for me, it's like, why do we fix what isn't broken? But, I mean, if you guys are getting,
I've heard some, like I say, I'm okay with the 4 vouchers, but I think we have to be a little more strict on that too, but
I probably had 3 or 4 people that have said that this is just a lot of work for keeping out those who really care about the kids.
So, how about this? I'll make a motion and we'll see if it dies or not. That adults
siblings.
and siblings are allowed at the game. Right? Fair?
And we would still administer the students as we have.
And then the 9 through 12 students would still be allowed to attend as they are. Okay, so we have a motion by Kyle.
I'll second that motion.
I have a second by Cody. Do I have any other discussion? Do we want to take a roll call vote? We're cool? Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries 5-0. I think, we have a real quick thing in executive session.
Can I add one thing to that? And a couple board members were at the game too, just having some help with this, but after the game, these people out of the gym, I'd like to hear a half hour.
We were in
Shut
a
some
good
lights off.
conversation.
I know, but the whole point of COVID and social distancing, I shut the lights off, I did.
Yeah.
But, it was a half hour, people were just all grouped together, hanging out in the gym, and, like I was it's nice outside, so we talk outside, we wanna talk outside, but just help them, now we're adding more people to the gym, potentially.
That's a good help.
Instead of having everyone hang out at the gym for another 45 minutes after the game, let's go home.
Have them make an announcement or something.
Right, and I shut the lights off
10 minutes
last
and put a
night.
timer on and,
It would be helpful, I mean, like, I know you guys were there, you know, I'm fine, 10, 15 minutes, people talking, but then you got something, let's go back, let's go talk outside, let's.
When you can't see the door, it's hard to go.
Yeah, right.
See you guys.
Right.
Susan,
Just Shane.
And you know what I mean, it just, I'm fine with a few minutes.
I need a motion to go to
Yeah,
executive session.
and it's for personnel, so I think it's 125, 1.
Did you get that, Jeremy?
So,
So,
We can help you.
I'll make a motion to go to executive session. Do I have a second?
Second.
Slade said it first. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign.
have a good night, guys.
You too.
You too.
It's on, I hit record, so it says standby now,
Put
but
your face a little closer.
why don't we, yeah, like